Hello again, this is Anthony Smith, retired SWCC chief. I'm doing an interview today with Brian Inglis. He's a retired SWCC operator, did 20 years in the Navy, and we're going to be talking about traumatic brain injury and major orthopedic injuries. And here we go. In this interview, number 10, Brian answered questions from the following questionnaire formats and gave permission to produce this presentation and share it openly. We covered the operator syndrome questionnaire, the GAD-7 scale, which is general anxiety, the PLC-5 questionnaire for PTSD, the PHQ, which is a basic health questionnaire, PHQ-9, and then the NSI neural behavioral symptoms inventory. And then lastly, I created a SWCC background questionnaire just to gather pertinent information about his career. So here's some background information about Brian Inglis. He's a retired chief, SWCC operator. He was in the military, the Navy, for 20 years. He spent 16 years as a SWCC operator. He was in class 33 and he graduated SWCC school in 2000. He served at SBT-12 and the Spec War Center as a SWCC instructor. He worked on 11-meter ribs. He did 4 deployment cycles on the ribs, several overseas exercises. He has an accumulated 12,000 plus hours on SWCC fast boats and an estimated 1.4 million weight pounding whiplash related impacts causing possible mTBI and or microconcussions. And he has no history of contact sports. So Navy SWCC is a special class of elite naval warriors who have been a decisive force behind some of America's most important secret missions. Special boat operations have unique and often deadly challenges due to the combination of operating powerful, sophisticated machines designed for speed and stealth in some of the planet's most inhospitable environments. The average SWCC career operator experiences mTBI and major orthopedic injuries over the course of their career in peacetime and in war. And Naval Special Warfare conducts missions in over 70 countries, 365 days a year. The sum of SWCC injury does not accumulate until the operator retires. Before we talk more about the interview, we need to briefly discuss operator syndrome. Operator syndrome is not a diagnosis. It is a qualitative, descriptive framework of a nexus of symptoms and illnesses, and it was coined by Dr. Christopher Free. There's a DOI link to it there, and we're going to be talking about operator syndrome and as it pertains to SWCC operators. So as I said, operator syndrome is not a diagnosis from the DSM-5. What it is a qualitative, descriptive framework. It's a nexus of psychiatric illnesses and disorders along with chronic major orthopedic injuries. In this research, operator syndrome affects all SOF forces, special operations forces from every major branch. There's a list there of different SOF forces, and as I said before, we're going to talk specifically about SWCC operators. All right, so within the operator syndrome framework, there are many different injuries and symptoms. And the ones in red here are the ones that Brian currently deals with. So he has traumatic brain injury diagnosed, endocrine dysfunction, sleep disturbance, obstructive sleep apnea, chronic pain, joint pain, back pain, orthopedic problems, and headaches. And every joint that he has severe pain and injury. Substance abuse, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, issues with anger, worry, rumination, and stress reactivity, marital, family, and community dysfunction, problems with some sexual health and intimacy, being on guard or hypervigilant, memory, concentration, and cognitive impairments, vestibular and vision impairments, and then some challenges with transition from the military to civilian life.
All right, so taking a look at some of Brian's issues due to SWC boat operations, traumatic brain injury. Uh, he has post-concussion syndrome with a two-lane diagnosis. He has an MRI, recent MRI with brain lesions, dead brain tissue. He is rated by the VA for a TBI at 10%, which I think is kind of funny. Sleep apnea, not rated, but he does have a CPAP prescribed from the VA. He has insomnia, PTSD, which was diagnosed by two-lane, depression, diagnosed by two-lane, anxiety, and then he has severe chronic C-spine issues, T-spine issues, and L-spine issues, and very comparative to all the issues that I personally have in my entire spine as well. He has a partial right knee replacement with previously multiple surgeries. And here in the near and dear future, he's going to be getting right ankle reconstruction surgery. A lot of issues, as you can see. Continuing on with some of Brian's issues, he has headaches, he has migraines. He was diagnosed with neurocognitive disorder related to his traumatic brain injury from Tulane. He has numerous orthopedic injuries in his hips, knees, shoulders, wrists, elbows, and ankles. Virtually every joint. He has some serious issues. He has multiple lumbar spine surgeries. He has dizziness, balance, and coordination issues, sensitivity to light and to noise, short-term memory issues, radiculopathy in both arms and legs, and executive function dysfunction.
All right, these are some of the symptoms that Brian experienced while operating on high-speed SWC boats. He experienced mental fatigue due to wave pounding on SWC boats. He experienced whiplash due to wave pounding on SWC boats. He experienced confusion, lack of focus, and concentration due to wave pounding on SWC boats. He experienced whole body wave pounding and whiplash at speeds of 50 knots. He experienced wave pounding in seas above 10 foot on SWC boats, and he has experienced many different orthopedic injuries due to wave pounding on SWC boats.
So, traumatic brain injury for retired SWC operator Brian Inglis. Just to cover the basics, which I do in every interview, the average SWC operator logs about 3,000 hours of boat time in a deployment cycle. These numbers have been verified by Group 4 and other entities within operations at the boat teams. We all seem to come up with the same number or similar numbers. Roche did a 94 study. Research on SWC boats, fast boats. They did it over an 8 or 6 day period, accumulating 36 hours of underway time at different speeds, which and measuring G-force impacts or just measuring impacts. And in that 36 hours, they measured 8,610 wave impacts, ranging from 2 to 25 Gs. Of the 8,610 wave impacts that they measured, 4,496 of those impacts ranged above 5 Gs, 5 to 15 on an average. If you average that out over 36 hours, you're talking about 124 significant impacts at 5 to 15 Gs in 1 hour. When you're ranging 5 to 15 Gs, you're talking about G forces that are definitely capable of causing mTBI, traumatic brain injury, and whiplash. So the exposure per SWC operator is pretty high and it's pretty significant. The average SWC operator possibly endures 374,000 plus significant G-force impacts from wave pounding on SWC boats in one deployment cycle. So look at all the numbers, do all the math, manipulate it how you need to. The numbers are going to turn out to be pretty significant no matter what number you come up with. So in retrospect, I think Brian possibly endured 374,000 plus impacts times 4 deployments, which equals 1,498,000 plus significant full body impacts while wave slamming on SWCC boats, which cause disastrous long-term effects of chronic orthopedic injury, whiplash, mTBI, and mTBI, leading to post-concussion syndrome. So all of these guys, especially, have the same numbers. It all looks the same. And the big issue here that we're trying to highlight is DOD, SOCOM, Spec War, everybody that's done any type of research on traumatic brain injury regarding SWCC operators, it's all been on the guys that are active duty. They spend a lot of money on looking at those guys. They're still young. They're still in shape. They're not living in the long-term effects, so they're not, drastically affected by TBI. But then again, if you look at guys 20 years down the road, like all of the guys I'm talking to, retired SWCC operators, 10 or 15 years or 20 years post service, post injury, and everything else. Now all of a sudden you're seeing all these guys with severe post-concussion syndrome, severe injury, severe orthopedic injury, and just these guys are having a hard time just living day to day. And there's a pretty good number of these guys that are suicidal as well. So this is a pretty big issue. There's a gap in research. These guys have not been researched, and I think in the next 5 to 10 years we're going to see some outcomes that nobody wants to see. So this is a summary of symptoms regarding TBI and orthopedic injuries, all within the operator syndrome framework that we've talked about earlier for Brian Inglis. So etymologically speaking, Brian is a 49-year-old retired special boat operator. As of January 23, which is right now when I'm doing this presentation, Brian has 20 years of military service. 16 of those years he was a SWCC operator. He did 4 deployments on SWCC fast boats, which includes an average of 12,000 or greater hours on SWCC fast boats, which potentially cause over 1.4 million significant full body impacts while wave pounding on fast boats. Brian has over 13 plus symptoms of mTBI and a nexus of orthopedic injuries. Brian endured full body slamming, whiplash, mental fatigue, dizziness, confusion, and blackouts from wave pounding at significant G-forces on 10-foot or greater seas at 65 miles an hour. Brian has many post-concussion symptoms from service-connected TBI and PTSD, along with long-term major orthopedic injuries one would expect to see based on his history of wave pounding and whiplash on military fast boats and other activities related to a SWCC career. And the last plug here is Brian does not have a history of contact sports, which is when we talk about brain research, traumatic brain injury, and then all of that, the first thing most researchers want to do is try to connect all of this TBI stuff and brain damage and everything else. They want to connect it to contact sports. Doesn't matter how many times you've been blown up, if you're special forces, SEALs, any of that stuff. If you have any connection to contact sports, they blame it on that. So we're going to make sure from here on out we ask every guy about contact sports, and we're going to make notes about that, but Brian doesn't have it. Lastly, conclusions from this ongoing project. So far, I've done 10 interviews or record reviews with retired former SWCC operators. 100% of these SWCC operators so far has significant TBI exposure contributing to post-concussion symptoms. 100% of SWCC operators experience full body wave pounding, whiplash, and orthopedic injury from SWCC boat operations, proven to cause mental, emotional, and physical injury. 100% of SWCC operators so far lack VA ratings for service-connected injuries due to SWCC fast boat service. The VA contends these issues are not service-connected because they were not claimed while on active duty, weren't seen by medical staff or things of that nature, myself included. Information in this presentation provides evidence Brian was a SWCC operator on SWCC fast boats for multiple deployments, and the aggregate of data collected in these interviews connect long-term TBI and post-concussion syndrome and orthopedic injury to SWCC fast boat service. Most importantly, thousands of former and retired SWCC operators suffer from long-term mTBI and major orthopedic injury without acknowledgement or help from the VA or DoD. There remains a gap in TBI research on this peer group. Someone needs to put money and time into formal research on retired and former SWCC operators 10, 15 years post-trauma, post-service, because these guys are living in the long-term effects of TBI and major orthopedic injury. Thank you.